and welcome back to another episode of McKill's Deck Chronicles. In today's episode, we're talking again with Dr. Mark Farris, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the Watchers in the Book of Enoch and fallen angels. And it's pretty interesting because I was talking to Mark here the other day on the phone, and he mentioned this, and he had a lot of stuff put together that I had never really thought about, and started doing a little bit more research on some of the documentation that you had sent over to me. And I think that it's definitely worth talking about the fallen angels and how that works in with what's happening today. And because, one of the things you'll hear a lot of people say is you'll always hear them say they, like the people controlling stuff, they don't want you to know this. And you've got these people that are rich, let's say, and they always seem to have the same orders to do stuff. And they're always doing this stuff. And it's like, well, somebody's telling them to do this stuff because there's no way they could do it on their own. So who are they that's behind this? And you have the answer to that, don't you?
Well, I always think of it this way, and when I hear they, because you hear that thrown around a lot, and it certainly does look like a, shall we say, a coordinated effort throughout the earth in all countries. COVID was a big example of that, just how they coordinated everything. Everybody was in lockstep with it, and so when I hear the word they, because that gets thrown around a lot, I always think about the fallen angels as being kind of the top of the heap for controlling this world. Of course, our top of the heap is the Most High God, our Creator.
Right.
But the fallen angels are certainly a factor in what's happening in this world today, and I think that is the ultimate they behind it. And then they have a host, hierarchy among them, and they have demons underneath them. And in this talk today, we'll get into a little bit about where I believe demons come from, because angels are different than demons. They're two separate spiritual beings and supernatural beings. And so when I look at the big picture, I kind of put it together this way. We all tend to go back and we look and we say, well, what causes all this mess in the world? Why is it so messed up? Why is there so much evil in the world? Why is there so much sin in the world? Why are things as bad as they are and just seem to get worse over time? And a lot of people go back to the Garden of Eden and they go, well, it's because, Eve bit that apple when she wasn't supposed to, or bit that fruit when she wasn't supposed to because God told them not to, and then she gave it to Adam and he bit it too, and so they rebelled. And so, okay, that's part of the answer. Okay, rebellion against God is part of the answer, and God certainly judged for that. We see that in Genesis chapter 3, the judgment on mankind for that. But there's two other falls that people tend to maybe shall we say, not think about, or maybe don't even know about. And so these watchers you were just talking about, the 200 watchers, or another fall, shall we say, a second fall. And I think it's just as significant of an impact on the shall we say, the shape of the world today as far as sin and evil, and just with things being as bad as they are, that second fall may have had as much or maybe even more of an impact on the world than that first fall did. Because when these watchers came down, we see this in Genesis chapter 6 in our Bible. It talks about the sons of God coming down and seeing that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took them for wives. It says any that they wanted, they chose and had, sexual relationships with them and had children with them. And these children were a hybrid of angels and mankind. And so they're called the Nephilim. And they say they were, men of renown, men that were able to do great feats. And they were giants. Some of them were, very large in stature as well, and very strong, and had abilities. And so that fall was definitely significant in when these hybrid race was created, I think that may have had as much to do with the Great Flood. When God said, the heart of man was just all continuously evil. But I think also the gene pool got corrupted by these angels coming down and having sexual relationship with women and creating a hybrid, a genetic hybrid that was not God's plan at all. And so he destroyed them. And the Book of Enoch has some great insights onto how they were destroyed. And then also the Great Flood, which was absolutely cleansed the earth, and only 8 people survived the Great Flood. That was Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives. But he also says, it's interesting. He says these Nephilim were around after the Great Flood.
Right, they were definitely around after.
So even after the Great Flood, we didn't get rid of them completely.
Right. Well, I'm going to share this here so anybody can see this. So what you were talking about here in Genesis 6:1, and it says, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth and daughters were born into them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives, all of which they chose. Okay. And then we skip down here to 6:4, and it says there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. So we know they were there later. When the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children unto them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. So these are the fallen angels that you're referring to, obviously. And that is scripture in the Bible in Genesis. Now, when you add to that, you can add to in the Book of Enoch, which is not canon. It is part of the Apocrypha, which is in between the Old and New Testament in some Bibles and omitted from lots of others. But it actually breaks down very similar in First Enoch and describes a little more depth, if it's accurate, to who these fallen angels actually were and how many of them there were. Right? I mean, so it's showing here in the Book of Enoch that these sons of God, which are interpreted obviously as angels, came down, says the same thing, but it goes on and states that 200 angels referred to as the watchers were the ones that were fallen. So according to the Book of Enoch, we have around 200 of these angels that were basically kicked out and fallen down to earth. And they're the ones that start doing this thing with women and having these offspring, which were giants. So that's where we obviously get the 200 from, right?
Absolutely. And those 200, they had leaders of those 200. They were divided into groups of 10. And here's something too that is interesting, is that in addition to these 200 having sexual relationships with the daughters of men and creating a hybrid offspring, you might say demigods. We'll maybe get into that in this talk a little bit, of how this ties in a little bit with mythology, with Greek mythology and Roman mythology. But they also gave mankind knowledge that was considered forbidden knowledge. They taught them how to use metals and make weapons. They taught women how to use cosmetics and adorn their bodies. And so this knowledge that they gave mankind led to warfare, a lot of murder, killing, vanity, with just using making the body just more attractive. And then in addition to those kind of things, that the knowledge they gave them, they also taught them about sorcery, astrology, divination, knowledge of herbs and cutting of roots. And so they were teaching them witchcraft as well. And so,
right.
And so this corruption, let's just think of it like the second fall. So we go back to that concept of three falls. Okay, so you got the Garden of Eden, and then you got these watchers coming down and having sex with women, but also, they lived with these women. They lived among mankind. They were able to take human form, and they imparted a lot of forbidden knowledge that
Right.
led to a lot more sin in the world. Just like with that weapon making, it basically gave man the ability to kill at will, and don't, we sure see that today. I mean, that's kind of never ended from that time on. And the weapons, they just get more and more sophisticated, and they get more and more accurate, and more shall we say, efficient at killing others. And so
Right.
these watchers, I mean, they rebelled against God. These I think it's important to understand, these were angels that chose to rebel against God. So just as mankind rebelled against God, we have 200 angels. Now think about that. I mean, these angels are in the presence of God. I mean, they can, go, up to the throne of God. I mean, they're supernatural. They can get above the dome. The throne of God's
Right.
on the dome. They can go into the presence of, and they still chose to rebel.
Right.
They decided to come down and to do what they wanted to do. Not to do it God's way, but to do it their way. And so God judged them for it, and He imprisoned them, and He said, he didn't allow that to happen. He recompensed them for the error of their ways, but the damage was done to mankind, and I think that's probably as a significant reason for the Great Flood as there was just the evil in the world, is that the gene pool had been corrupted.
Right. Well, that's one of the theories when they talk about Noah, and they talk about he was perfect, and they're saying that could mean that he's perfect in his DNA, in his gene pool. So him and his family had not intermixed with these demoniacs or whatever they are, from these Nephilim, if you will, or giants. But now, when you say they're imprisoned, I know we have verses in the Bible that shows that hell was created for the devil and his angels. Now, obviously, those angels are these fallen angels that we're talking about. Um, so now, don't we think now, based on some other scriptures you were telling me, that these angels are actually the head over countries? So we have roughly 200 fallen angels, and we have roughly 200 countries that they could be over, ruling them.
Yeah, that's leading into the third fall. Let me, before we go there, let's just cover, when we look at the Book of Enoch. It says with these angels that there was a group of them that he bound them and he imprisoned them in a desolate place. It's like a subterranean place. We might think of that as an abyss or Hades, because no one's in hell yet. Hell was created for Satan and his angels, but they're not there yet. But the leader of these angels, he singled him out for the harsher punishment, and he put him in a pit, in the a subterranean pit, and he actually covered this one with stones, sharp stones, and he is bound there until the day of judgment, when he'll be thrown into hell, into the fire. And so,
And, and that
so
is in
these
the book of
guys,
Enoch. That's in the
this
book
is
of Enoch,
this is
right?
out of the Book of Enoch, yes.
Okay.
Which the Book of Enoch is not in our canon now. In the Ethiopian church, it is canon for the Ethiopian church. At least I think about the first 30 chapters or so is canon in their Bible, and has been for a long time. And so, but for us, it's not. But even though it's not canon for us, I think I've read the entire book multiple times, and it gives a lot of insight, it gives more detail into our scriptures, and so I think we can gain some insight and some better understanding of what's going on behind the scenes by reading the Book of Enoch and looking at what's happening. Because when you look at what God says in the Bible, and then you look at the Book of Enoch, uh, it correlates together very well.
Right.
it's
So,
just a lot more detail.
so at what point do we get these fallen angels over the countries then?
Okay, so let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 8, and just to give you a little background on this, everybody's familiar with the story of the Tower of Babel, and that they were trying to build a tower to heaven to reach heaven, and God came down and confused the languages
Right.
and scattered the nations at that point. And so it says in Deuteronomy 32, it says, this is verse 8, it says, when the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. Sons of God are those angels. But at this point, when he did this, I don't think these angels were fallen. I don't think these particular angels, when God did this, when he confused the languages at Babel, which uh, we believe there was about 70 nations, 70 different languages, 70 nations created. These angels at this point, I don't think had fallen. I mean, God just gave them. He said, "Okay, you don't want to follow me, you don't want to give me your worship and only your believing loyalty to me." He said, "So I'm going to turn you over and let my my sons of God, my lesser angels, created angels, rule over you." And what he did was he gave these nations, he gave an angel over each one. But for his portion, he says in verse 9, he says, but the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob, his allotted heritage. That's the nation of Israel, which we're grafted into as believers in Jesus Christ. We are grafted into that nation, God's people. We are God's people, part of his nation, his heritage, because Jesus came and paved the way for us with that. But these angels were actually given rule over these nations. And eventually, what happened is that they decided they wanted to be worshiped. That they decided that, hey, this is kind of nice being top dog of a nation. And you know what? I want them to worship me. I want them to, me, I'm the top dog. And so over time, pride and arrogance consumed these angels. Again, these are God's created angels. I mean, that were able to go into the presence of God, and they fell. This is the third fall. And so these angels fell, and then God eventually just basically gets fed up with him. And where we can see what God said to him, we can go to Psalm 82. And here's what he says. He says, God standeth in the congregation of the mighty. He judgeth among the gods. And he says to him, how long will ye judge unjustly and accept the persons of the wicked? So he's saying, why are you acting like this? He says, defend the poor and fatherless, do justice to the afflicted and needy, deliver the poor and needy, rid them out of the hand of the wicked. So God's saying, you're not doing your job. You guys you've fallen down on the job, and you're doing a horrible job of it. And he says, and he's talking about the people now. He says, they know not, neither will they understand. They walk on in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are out of course. So he's just saying things, I put you in charge of these 70 nations, and things are, you're just drop the ball. Things are just gone. I mean, it's horrible what's happening. And then he says to them, he says, I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. He's talking to his angels now that he put in charge of these nations. He says, but ye shall die like men and fall like one of the princes. And he says, arise, O God, judge the earth, for thou shalt inherit all nations. So he's telling them that, hey, you dropped the ball. You didn't do what you were supposed to do. And so think of this as the third fall. So, and so when you look at it, and what's interesting to me about this is that when you look at it, when I look at the Greek mythology, the Roman mythology, and I see this pantheon of gods and how they fight among themselves, and there's hierarchy there, and there's all this, this pride and avarice and jealousy and positioning for, position. I think of these 70 angels that were given charge over the nations at Babel, and that eventually they fell. And like in our myths, like the Greek myths and Roman myths, this is the pantheon. These are the pantheons. And then the demigods that you see in these myths and these Greek and Roman myths would be the Nephilim, these hybrids of angels and men. And what's interesting to me is you'll see this, like I enjoy books that are historically based, and in ancient Japan, they called Japan the land of the gods. Now, why would they call it the land of the gods? Because a fallen angel ruled over that. And there were probably more than one. There could have been multiple fallen angels. And they believed that their leader in Japan, now you're going back to the 1600s Japan now, was divine, that he was part God. So you see, even in man's history, that we got this mixing of the gods and humankind. And there's our leader, our emperor of Japan is divine. He's got part God in him, and we're the land of the gods. They call themselves the land of the gods. So all of this you start connecting the dots. A lot of this stuff ties together, and it's interesting because when you look at our scripture, it's in our scripture, and as you start connecting the dots in the scripture, you start seeing, there's a lot going on. There's a reason why the world's so messed up. It's because these fallen angels, and the demons, and the demons, I believe that the demons are the souls of these Nephilim. When they died, these demigods, that was a hybrid between angels and man, and mankind, of women. I believe those souls, when they departed, they become demons. They can't be saved. They don't. It's just like when we depart, we don't die. Our soul and spirit lives on. We don't. It's just where are we going to live?
Right.
None of us die. We leave this physical body, but we live on. Same with the Nephilim, with these hybrid beings. Their soul and spirit departed, but they live on. And I think those are what demons are. And I think they're in cahoots with the fallen angels, and they work together, and then sometimes they don't work together. They battle each other. They jockey for position. They jockey for power. They have arguments about who the head demon is, who the head fallen angel is, who has control of this nation, who gets to do what. That is what I see happening in the world today, is that these nations are truly controlled by they. And that they would be the fallen angels and the demons. And then the people are just their minions, they're minions of them. And, they've fallen for various reasons, power, money, the very, just the sin nature of man. It's just it seems easy to corrupt a lot of people. And I think unless you have the Spirit of Jesus Christ living in you, the Holy Spirit, unless you have that, I think we can be corrupted very easily. And
Right.
it's evident in the world today. So the three falls, the Garden of Eden, uh, the 200 coming down having sex with women and giving forbidden knowledge, the second fall. And then the third fall would be when he gave these angels charge over the nations, and then they decided they wanted to be worshiped. And that's where I kind of see where the Greek and Roman pantheons come from.
Right. Well, having to do with the 200, of course, that is, again, that comes out of the Book of Enoch as far as the numbers are concerned. But what makes that seem like that could be, accurate is the fact that, let's say that they're over some of these nations now, that each one of these fallen angels is possibly the prince or something over a nation. We have almost 200 nations, right? Or 200 countries that they could possibly be over, but whether they're all over something is here or there. But, they also, we have, and I have a picture of it here. We have, let me find it. And this is a theory that I've seen many, many times. And that is, we have all over Earth, I was going to say the planet Earth, but it's not a planet. All over Earth, we have these craters. And there's approximately 200 of these craters that they've counted. And they claim these are from asteroids or meteorites or whatever they're from. But the problem with saying an asteroid made these huge craters is that there's no asteroid around. So they can't find the asteroid that made the indentment, that made the crater. They can't find any residue of anything. We just have these giant craters all over the earth, and there's roughly 200 of them. So one of the things that I had found is they're thinking when these 200 angels actually fell to earth, we literally mean were thrown out and fell and hit. And when they hit, they created these craters. So I don't know if you've heard of that or if you think that could be accurate.
I think it's very interesting, and like I say, that number 200 is interesting because if you look at the number of nations on the earth, the U.S. State Department says there's 198. So that's right there
Right.
at
So
200.
so right
Okay,
there at
and
200.
and Jesus talks about that. He saw Satan being cast out of heaven. You know, being flung to the earth, and he fell like a thunderbolt. And he says, he took a third of the angels with him. Now we don't know how many that is. A third could be a whole lot. Okay, because
Right.
it's just a percentage. We don't. But he says, his tail, the dragon's tail, swept a third of the stars with him, and the stars referring to these sons of God, angels. So a third chose to rebel with him. So I tend to believe that nations may have multiple fallen angels directing them, because fallen angels can only be at one point at one time. They're not like God. God
Right.
knows everything all the time. He's omniscient, he's omnipotent, he's omnipresent, he knows it all. But these angels don't. Even though they're supernatural and they have a lot of power, they're still limited. Now they might be able to travel quickly because they are Elohim. They are supernatural, spiritual beings. They can take the form of a body, but they don't have to. And so they can switch back and forth. And so there could be, like, there are multiple fallen angels and demons. We don't know how many demons because we don't know how many Nephilim there was. I mean, there
Right.
could have been a lot of Nephilim. And so, um, it's interesting too, tying into that with okay, like the craters there. I've seen one of those craters out in Arizona, and it is impressive. I mean,
Yeah.
you can tell something impacted there, and
Something's
I tell
created
you
it.
that
Yeah.
you look down there, it's just a big, it's just a big crater. There's nothing there, and so I think a plausible explanation could be, one of the angels that were cast out of heaven were literally slung to earth, and when they
Right.
hit the earth, they did make an impact. Because these are supernatural beings. They're very powerful, and they have abilities probably beyond our greatest imagination. For
Right.
us, it would seem like they're able to do magical things, but for them, it's just normal stuff. They just operate in multiple dimensions, shall we say, multiple areas of power. That's just normal for them. Um, so yeah, that 200, the 200, and then the 200 nations, and then the 200 fallen angels when in the second fall. It is interesting when you start connecting the dots how those numbers do kind of
Hmm.
line up with each other.
Well, and then on top of that, which is this picture that I have here over there in Kazakhstan, I think is how you pronounce it. They've got a giant pyramid built over there, and in the top of this pyramid is this room right here, and it's some kind of a special meeting room they've designed that supposedly for religious purposes, and it has 200 seats.
Hmm.
And so people are saying that this thing here is built for those 200 fallen angels to meet, whether they're meeting now or they're planning to meet in the future, possibly, when the Antichrist is revealed, something like that that's coming up, possibly when these things can possibly reveal themselves then, as what they are, and they will have a place to go meet. And so they've got a pyramid built, and of course you can see it. You can see a whole lot more pictures, but it's in Kazakhstan, and I think that's really interesting because they've mimicked it off of the pyramids over there in Egypt, which is just full of pagan writing. The ones that have the hieroglyphics in them. It's full of pagan gods and all that stuff, which goes right back to the pantheon. These so-called Egyptian gods they were worshiping apparently gave them information on how to build and do things that they can't even do now.
Now
And
that's an interesting point.
so and so now in the future we're still, whether or not I believed it or whether or not it's in the Holy Bible, it's in this Book of Enoch right here, and somebody believes it, I think, because this book says 200. We've got the 200 craters, we've got the 200 countries, and now we've got people building pyramids with 200 seats for a future meeting. Well, what's the significance of 200? Well, obviously, it's the 200 fallen angels. Now, if these fallen angels are ruling this earth, of course, we know Satan is ultimately, he offered it to Jesus and said, "Hey, you can have all this if you worship me." So he's the big dog. Everybody else is underneath him, obviously. But that's how these guys are coming up with this stuff. I think all this technology and stuff. I mean, they're coming out with technology and stuff like you wouldn't believe, like you were saying, to commit war even. But I mean, it wasn't very long ago. I mean, I had, before the iPhone, it wasn't that long ago. It's like we had, in 2000 something, we have an iPhone, the beginning of it. Before that, we have an analog phone. 5 years before that, you don't even have cell phones. They don't even exist. And then all of a sudden, we've got one in our hand that, is doing everything. So, but it's funny that a lot of this stuff goes back to the old time, like this, when they want to build something they think is awesome, they build a pyramid. And we've got these pyramids sitting around that have been there 4,000 or 5,000 years, supposedly. And supposedly the Egyptians built them, although nobody can prove how they built them or anything like that. And so I think some of that technology from those fallen angels, they're saying, "Hey, here's how you do it." They supplied it or helped. and they're still in power today.
I think you make a
Obviously.
good point there. And when you look at some of these structures around the world, around the earth, like some of the Aztecs, that structures, the island of Malta, the pyramids you mentioned, and there's multiple pyramids all over the earth, by the way, they're everywhere. And you look at these blocks, and some of these blocks, they weigh 20 tons, 30 tons, 40 tons. I mean, they're huge. We don't have the technology to lay that kind of rock today with that stone to move it. And so I think you're onto something there. And I tend to lean in that direction too, that these structures, which we can't build today, that the fallen angels and maybe even the Nephilim, these demigods, we'll call them a hybrid of angel and man, built these structures, and that's how they were built. They were built with technologies and strength that we don't possess. We can't duplicate those structures today. We look at them and we just go, there's no way that we could replicate that thing with the precision that they did it, with the massive stones that they laid. And so I fully believe that, yes, a lot of these, so we say, unexplained buildings, structures all around the earth, and some of it's, I think, even being hidden from us because it'd just be so obvious that they let people see it.
Right.
That like I always wonder what's beyond the ice wall.
Yeah.
They
Who
won't let
knows?
us see that, right? They locked that down. 1959 is when that treaty came about, and
Yeah.
they can't agree on much, but they can sure agree on that nobody gets to come down there unless we get to supervise you and tell you where you can go. But I think these structures, buildings, some of these fantastic buildings we see around the earth that we can't build today. We don't have the technology to build it today. They're just so massive, and it's so intricate. I think definitely that knowledge, that expertise to build that was from the fallen angels,
Sure.
and the demons, the Nephilim, if you will. So I think that is a more plausible explanation for some of these unsolved mysteries, and we go, oh, we have no idea how they did this. Well, I think maybe we can guess how they did it, but you
Right.
have to have a supernatural, you have to have a biblical approach to it, shall we say, an unseen realm approach, and realize that the supernatural realm does exist. It's very real, and it's always been around, and it definitely impacts this world. And I think it explains a lot of what's going on in many aspects of the nations around the earth, with all the drama you see and all the back and forth, and all the mess, all the killings, like the Ukraine mess, for instance. I mean, it seems like they love war and they want to keep it on. I mean, just look how many people in our government, are just foaming at the mouth to keep that war going, and we're the ones keeping it going by giving money,
All
and
right.
and weapons, and so it explains a lot when you start looking at it from a supernatural, the unseen realm point of view. You start
Right.
realizing that there were actually three falls: the Garden of Eden, the Babel when God scattered the nations, and then when He gave the 200 came down and had and created hybrids. But here's some good news that I always keep in mind. When Jesus came 2,000 years ago, when God incarnated as fully man, fully God, and created a way of salvation for us to be reconciled with Him by His blood, that if we choose to believe and have believing loyalty in just him each day, we can be reconciled. Basically, Jesus was going on the offensive there. He was saying, I'm taking back all the nations. They're all mine. I'm taking them all back. And so for 2,000 years, we've been in an offense. When he says the gates of hell shall not prevail against it, when he's talking about his gospel, his revelation of him, that he's the rock. He is the rock. He's our foundation stone. That wasn't a defensive, the gates of hell. That wasn't talking to defense on the gates of hell. That was offense. That he's charging the gates of hell with his gospel, taking back the nations, the people of the world. So that's the good news. Each person can choose this day to have just believing loyalty in Jesus and nothing else, that him dying on the cross to pay the price for our sins. And if you choose that, you will be saved. And all you have to do is continue to choose that every day. It's a choice every day. It's just him and him only. You add nothing to it. It's not being a good person. It's not going to church. It's not giving to the poor. It's not praying a lot. It's not belonging to a certain church. If you add anything to it, you just negated the gospel. You just canceled it out. It's Jesus and him only, and what he did on the cross for us, and us choosing to believe it and put all of our faith in him. So that's the good news, is that even though all of this has occurred, that it's horrible, the shape that the world is in. When you look around the earth and you see what's going on, it's horrible. But the good news is, I take great comfort in the Psalms, because if you read the Psalms, there's 150 Psalms. If you read the Psalms, boy, he lays it out. He says, well, I'm gonna take it all back. He says, and I will recompense man in this life and the one to come. So that can be real good news for each of us, that we'll be recompensed in this life and the one to come, or it can be some real bad news for some people.
Yeah, it can be real bad for some people. Well, yeah, that can be real bad for some people. But yeah, you're right. All this, we've got, Bible talks about these angels falling, regardless of how many fell and what they're doing and what they're planning. Obviously, the Bible talks about what's going to happen in the end. Jesus is going to prevail. He's going to come down, and he's going to, Armageddon. So, so we're good. If you're saved, you're good. If you're not saved, you're going to have problems. You probably get to meet some of those fallen angels right down there in the pit, in hell. When they get cast down into hell, you're going to get cast right down in there with them, because, you're not saved. But anyway, like you said, the good news is all it takes is belief in Jesus Christ, asking, admitting you're a sinner and say, hey, please save me, and you're saved. That's, faith, grace and faith is all it takes. So that's good. But, anyway, we are, just about out of time here. So, we had about 45 minutes. We're up to 43. So do you have any statements you'd like to, closing statement or anything here to tell everybody on the way out?
Well, I think that's a good place to end it, is, to put your focus on Jesus and believing loyalty in him each day. That's the way. It is known, is what I like to say. And so that, to me, I take great comfort in it. And I just would hate to be without that saving grace, with that knowledge, knowing it's not based on what I do. It's not because I deserve it, and it's not that I merit it in any way or earn it, but it's his free gift to me and to each of us, if we choose to believe it. And that, for me, it comes down to a choice. You have to choose, and then if you do that, then you will be saved. And so I think that's a great place to wrap it up, Kenny, and always enjoy talking to a fellow brother. God bless you.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on, and yeah, we'll end it with that. So if anybody on here has any questions or wants to get in contact with you, You can, of course, get in contact with me and at truthseekers2012@gmail.com. You can also go to either one of the websites. We've got itsflatbro.com and truthseekersministry.org. And so if you're interested in any more information or whatever, just shoot us over an email and I'd be happy to answer it or forward anything to Mark if you have any questions for him. And of course, you can find us both on X, and there's links to X and Patreon and other stuff on those websites. So you can find us both on there. And because we have this is available on the website too, if you're interested in finding a little bit more about the flat earth and the realm that we both agree we live on. So you can find more information on that on X as well. So I think that's it. So if you guys anybody has any questions or anything, just give us an email and we'll be happy to get back in touch with you. So until then, thanks for listening and God bless you.